Okay, welcome back. Let's see. In the last recordings, the steps we completed, we fully deployed our underlay that was fully automated into AWS. We set up our enterprise ROOT-CA. We added in vbond vsmart, set up certificates, and we applied templates to put vsmart and vEdge into vmanage mode so they would sync and start communicating over netconf. And we set up our tenant and we added in the tenant viptela license file. So today we are going to onboard an edge, and instead of doing it via the pipeline, we are going to simulate how we would do this as a DevOps engineer using an automation task via Concourse. So today, to onboard a virtual edge, we are going to use the ZTP process. Now, the ZTP process is actually 11-12 steps. So because vBond is a whitelist model, our vEdge first needs to reach out and communicate to vBond, and it will authenticate and authorize using a virtual chassis number, a virtual OTP, and a certificate. So the first thing we're going to do is to get this virtual chassis number and OTP and get it in the right format that we're going to use to put into our boot init file or our user data file in AWS. We're going to generate something called a bootstrap file. And then we're going to edit the user data file in Git for our vEdge. We're going to paste that in. We're going to use an automation task to deploy our vEdge device to AWS. Once it comes up, we're going to configure it. We're going to copy our ROOT-CA.PEM onto it and install the cert chain. Then we're going to run a command that is going to say, like, request to vBond that says request vEdge cloud activate chassis number, our virtual chassis number, and then token, our OTP number. After that, we generate our CSR. And we copy the CSR to the ROOT-CA. We generate the certificate, copy the certificate back to the edge device, install it, and then at that point in time, we switch over to vmanage GUI, and we have to click, we may need to select to make the certificate valid. So we're going to do part of this through automation tasks and Concourse, and part of it through the GUI. So let's get going. Now, if you're a DevOps engineer and you come out of your weekly sprint, you're going to have a few tasks. They'll be weighted different. Usually, like, a really complex task could be rated 5, so 5 hours, or maybe that could be 5 days. Maybe one waiting point is a day of work. So it depends on your team. Your team will kind of figure that out. In my experience, 1 point is a day of work. So this task could be half a point, half a day of work, and I would have the JIRA ticket, and I would go back to my desk, and I would immediately create a new Git branch. But before I do any commits, I'm going to test my local code, but I'm going to do it still in Concourse in the actual build container that's used in the pipeline. Okay, that way I can really test it out well. And if everything works, I may run it through my pipeline, and if I'm happy with it, I will do a Git commit, and I will do this throughout the week until I have 4 or 5 commits. And if they're all looking good and everything has no errors, I'll put in a PR. All the other developers will put in their PRs, or DevOps engineers, and then there'll be a code review, and all those PRs will get built in the pipeline. If they pass, it might roll into the QA pipeline, and if that passes, well, we'll be cutting a new release. All right, so what's our first step here? I am logged into Concourse. I'm going to log in to the tenant view. So here I am, and I'm in configuration devices. And you can see here that I have 12 virtual chassis numbers, and it doesn't show the OTP in this view. That's interesting. But this correlates to what I set up, the 12 devices I set up here in CiscoLicensing.com. for this tenant. All right, so we can see that the vEdge routers, they're not prefixed with anything, but CSR is prefixed with CSR, Cat8K with Cat8K. So let's go ahead and pick one of these. Let's pick this bottom one here. And we're going to go to generate the bootstrap file. We're going to go over to these three dots and we're going to go generate bootstrap config. And we're going to select this, not include the default ROOT-CA because that's actually not RCA. It uses some Viptela CA and that won't work for us because we're using enterprise CA. And we're going to copy the part right here. You can see it has an OTP in there and it has our vBond correct. And what I'm going to do is copy it out and I'm going to go over to my code and I am going to go into my AWS deploy vEdge router task that I'm working on. And I'm going to take my vEdge user data file and I'm just going to paste that into it. Okay, perfect. So you see now it generated for us an OTP and this UUID, which is our virtual chassis number. All right, now what I'm going to do is I've broken this into a few different tasks to kind of go over each step. So the first thing I'm going to do is execute to generate a new EIP for my new vEdge. So I'm going to do fly target, fly -t, target prod CI, which is my environment that I'm working on. Execute -c, my config file. So I'm going to generate EIP. And it gives us, if we can watch our task run here. Now tasks run a little slower than they do in the pipeline because when we run a task this way, it's building a fresh container. So it said it's exceeded. I also can watch my task run in a GUI view, and this is kind of actually handy because if it's a long running task, I may want to multitask and start doing other work while I'm waiting for it to complete. So I can see it in this view as well. All right, so it looks like it generated my Elastic IP and wrote the EIP ID into the vault for both NICs that are going to be going on to this instance. Next step, what I'm going to do is, actually I'm not sure, do I write this to the vault? I can't remember. No, the next step is I'm going to deploy the device. So I'm going to run this task. And if I look at the Python for this guy, he's deploying the instance with that user data file that I just edited. And remember, I haven't committed anything. So the task, if we look at the task, it's actually calling input, not get. If you look in the pipeline, all the tasks are calling get resource, the resource that belongs to the pipeline. Here I'm building local code, but I'm building it up in the cloud in my ephemeral build container. So I get the single sign-on into all the resources that the concourse provides securely. Okay, so let's run this one. So I'm just going to arrow up on my command, backspace over the last task file name, and do this one. All right, now this one again, it gives us another link. So it's a little bit longer running task because if you remember, Python has to poll the instance until it's in a ready state. So the instance comes up really fast, like it just popped up, boom. But now it has to attach all the interfaces, and it has to, here it's associating the EIP, and this is all the JSON coming back off the AWS API. It's associating the public NIC. And then it's going to probably take about 5 minutes to initialize. After it initializes, it should be up and running, NICs on the correct indexes. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write those NIC IPs into the vault, and then I'm going to run my configuration task, which is going to call those IPs to make the correct connection, and it's going to configure that vEdge. So I'm just gonna pause until the task goes green, because we know that it's gonna take, like, this is like a larger instance type. It takes, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. Okay, our task went green. Beautiful. So now I'm going to run my next task, which is going to just write those IPs into the vault. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can see how much faster the pipeline is, because our pipeline did all this for us in like 5 or 6 minutes for the entire cluster. So all right, if this is successful, I am going to switch directories and go, oh yeah, it was, beauty. So I'm going to go into my configure vEdge directory, and I'm going to run the task to configure this now. Okay. Now, if this goes green, then we are good to go. What we're going to do is then SSH onto this vEdge. We're going to copy ROOT-CA.PEM from vmanage or our enterprise ROOT-CA. We're going to install the root chain. Oh, beautiful. There it goes. Just configuring everything. Sweet. Okay. Let's go ahead, and we are going to, actually, we need to get the IP for this guy. So let's see here. All right, I'm going to have to make a change to my code to make sure it prints out the external IP, because I'm not seeing it in here. So I'm going to do a little cheat, and I'm just going to look at AWS and see what elastic IP it ended up getting. So it got, here we go, vh1. If you go down to networking, we want the VPN 01, so it's this guy here. Okay, so I'm going to SSH onto this guy. Okay, now I am going to copy over the ROOT-CA.PEM and install the chain. And actually, I'm going to close, now that I'm done with these tasks, I'm going to close them out. And I am going to open up my enterprise CA instructions here, and my scratch file where I have all my IPs. And I am going to do vshell scp minus, scp admin at the IP of my vmanage or my enterprise ROOT-CA, home admin ROOT-CA.PEM, and I'm just going to put it here. It's going to prompt me to authenticate. Let's see if we can telnet. So we can telnet. Now remember, you're not going to be giving your tenants access to SSH onto your vmanage, obviously. So what we're simulating here is the tenant receiving the ROOT-CA.PEM. So obviously they need to be able to access it from somewhere. So we can talk about that later. We could actually give them a token into just that specific secret in the vault. So they could actually make a REST call into the vault with their token and only be able to access the ROOT-CA.PEM or whatever. Or there could be another way. They could be able to download it from somewhere. But just to clarify. So, all right, so let's SCP admin at home admin ROOT-CA.PEM. Okay, I was able to copy over the ROOT-CA.PEM there. So, oops, now you can see it there. All right, so now what I'm going to do is go back to the regular prompt, the teleprompt, and I'm going to run this command to install the cert chain. Successful. Okay, now before I can make the CSR request, I need to actually run this command here to this activate chassis number, and we're going to need to use the chassis number and the token that was in our user data file. So we're going to go back to our user data file. AWS deploy vEdge, configure deploy, here we go. And we're going to copy it out of there. So here is the UID, which is the equivalent of the chassis number. So I'm just queuing up my command here. And then I'm going to grab this OTP. And I am going to go like this. I'm going to copy this whole string. And I'm going to run this on the vEdge. It ran. At this point in time, now I can request the CSR. So what I'm going to do is, first I want to test that it can ping vbond. Okay, it can. So that's good. I have ICMP open. Some people won't have ICMP, so you could test on the port that it is going to communicate on, DTLS, I think it starts out with. What we're going to do now is we are going to request a CSR. And we're going to do this. Now it prompts us for our organization name. This is the part where you may want to look back to understand this to softwarelicensing.com. Let's go back there. And if we look at the controller profile on this guy, we will be able to find that. So our organization name is our service provider name hyphen our tenant name. So we're gonna go here, paste this in, paste it again. And it said that the CSR is good. So let's go back to vShell, and we can see that we have a vEdge 1 CSR, and this is very interesting. We also have a vEdge Cloud CSR. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this CSR over to our enterprise CA, and then we're going to generate the cert, copy the cert back, install it, and in that point in time, we're going to switch over to the GUI, and hopefully we should see this machine onboarded. So I'm going to pause the recording while I do all this copying and certificate creation, because it's redundant to what we've already seen, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have I went with the vEdge Cloud CSR, and we have the cert generated and copied back. So now we're going to exit out of vShell, and we're going to do request certificate install. Okay, so we know now that that one doesn't work. So I'm going to try the next one, which is the one that I generated, which is this vEdge 1 CSR. So let me copy this to the ROOT-CA, generate a cert, and we'll try to install that cert. Okay, let's try the cert created from that CSR. So let's run the command again. And we're going to do the vEdge 1.crt. Oh, I called it CST. Let's just rename that. Okay. Let's try it again. Yay, it succeeded. All right, so now for the exciting part. We're going to go over to here, and we should be able to go, oops, my apologies, to vmanage. Just make this a little bigger. And we can see now that the host name has shown up and that it's reachable. It's at 20.11. So let's go here, and let's look around here a little bit more, and let's go to certificates. And we can see that we have the virtual chassis number and OTP, and it's showing as valid. So that's perfect. All right, so we have onboarded our Edge device. Let's go ahead and select send to controllers. And this is going to take a few minutes. Then we'll go into monitoring. Perfect, success. And it takes a little while for things to bake and all the connections to get up and running. So we're seeing, yeah, it's going to take probably 5 to 10 minutes. So we're going to pause and come back. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do a really fun exercise. We're going to SSH onto the vmanage, the vbond, the vsmart, and the vEdge, and we are going to run some commands, and we are going to look at the DTLS connections and how they're talking back and forth, so that we can fully understand what's going on and verify that all of our running configurations are set up properly, that DNS is set up properly, and that OMP is working. And so let's give this, 10 or 15 minutes to bake, and then we'll go through and we will verify that everything is set up correctly. Okay, we've given things a few minutes to bake. What I've done is I've made an SSH connection onto vmanage, vsmart, and here we are in vEdge. So if we run show control connections on vEdge, we can see that it has a DTLS connection to vbond and vmanage. So DTLS is the UDP version of TLS. And yeah, it's showing as up, so that's good, no errors. We can go on to vsmart and we can do, so I'm just going to show control connections, and we can see that vsmart, everything is looking good, there's no errors, the state is up, the state is connect, so everything is looking really good here. Let's go on to vmanage, and we'll do show control connections, and everything is showing as up. That's perfect. We can also do show control connections history. Okay. We see while it was coming up, it was having a few errors. That's normal. And then once things start to bake, we start to come up. And let's just see what our current control connections say. So currently no errors. It's looking good. So this finishes the session on how to bring on an edge device. Now, what we're going to do in the next recording is go over the API, and we're going to actually circle back, and we're going to pick out some of the tasks that we did manually with the GUI, and we're going to try doing those with the API, and we're going to analyze the JSON that comes back from the API, and we are going to see how we will, for example, run a JSON query to get some specific key value pairs, put those into variables, and then ingest those variables to do some post commands. So I look forward to seeing you on the next recording, which is going to be how to do some automation tasks using vmanage API.